So this is a pretty big change to how we do things around here, and so within all that straying away from the norm comes a huge amount of risk. But this is a topic that I have been recently thinking about a lot and looking into, and yet I can find so little really talking about it, so here we are. I think it should be pretty obvious what I'm going to discuss here, even if I haven't actually said the word yet. But yeah, this is going to be about the idea of retransitioning, an idea that I think speaks to a deeper part and understanding of the idea of gender as a journey, and is also going to be a bit of a personal story and personal stake to it. Because I recognise that having an example goes a long way to fueling these kind of things. And so I am going to be the example today. Yay, that sure sounds fun, doesn't it? But let's begin with talking about what retransitioning actually is, before we start doing some story-based interweaving for education purposes, because it might not be immediately clear what it's referring to. And that would be because, like quite a few trans things, it's a bit of an emergent field of discussion, and there are a lot of words that don't quite have unified, consistent meanings to them. Trust me, that is going to come up later as something worth remembering, and when we get there I will be sure to remind you how smartly I referenced a point I knew that I was going to make later on. I suppose it's a bit less smart when I lay it out like that, and it would be even less smart if I forgot to do that. Regardless, retransitioning is basically the phase that comes after detransitioning, which generally comes after transitioning, although it's worth noting that some versions of retransitioning can also just come after transitioning, which is all really dependent on the person in question and how they view it. And now I need to explain all three of those terms for us to be able to keep going. Oh lord. So transitioning is when a generally trans person, there are not many people who transition who aren't trans, but I can think of one or two examples in the femboy field, which I don't personally necessarily understand, but who do elements of transitioning to be more femboy, I guess? But anyway, transitioning is when someone uses a variety of methods, including hormonal, surgical, social, or insert other routes here, to attempt to align themselves more with whatever gender they internally see themselves as and identify with, compared generally to whatever gender they were assigned or forced into by our frankly kinda boring society. Only two genders? You wouldn't go to an ice cream shop with only two flavours, would you? That would suck, even if they did do those flavours well, and trust me, cis society has been doing those two genders terribly. So with us knowing that, detransitioning is, logically, the step by which a person takes some or all of those routes to go back to the gender that they were assigned or forced into. Now, detransitioning isn't necessarily always a bad thing. There are people who do it because it does just turn out that transitioning was not what they needed to do. But there are also plenty of people who detransition in a way that is a bad thing, because they're doing it due to pressures from their friends or family or the wider society around them, or from mental or medical issues, or because of the government just straight up stopping them. Now, I say that those are bad things, but I'm not blaming the trans person at the centre of it, at least as long as they don't take the detransition as a chance to potshot the trans community, because in a lot of these cases, people are detransitioning for safety reasons, and it's not their fault that it's such an issue to the degree it requires going back in the closet. So from those descriptions of detransitioning and transitioning, retransitioning would be the renewal or adjustment of a transition, wherein someone has transitioned and then transitions again in a different direction to the one they previously took, or the same one again, while still identifying as trans or identifying their actions as transitioning. or someone who has detransitioned and then transitions again once they feel able to do so, with whatever reasons they stopped having been resolved. Now, sure, this is a very complex way to describe something that might seem rather simple, but I'm trying to cover as many bases as possible here, and so the challenge becomes ensuring that nobody feels left out in the definitions that I'm making of this. So, excuse me my quibbling. Now that we have reached this retransition point though, I think this is the moment where we can talk a little bit of personal mixed in with the larger conversation. Because I have recently been dealing with the idea of retransitioning after a long period of sort of detransition. Now, that's potentially a pretty shocking revelation to a few people who watch this channel, and if you don't watch this channel, then it's probably kind of not a big deal at all. See, when I made the choice a while back to stop taking HRT, and also to go by gender fluid and all pronouns rather than a trans woman and only she, her, that was a choice not made or rooted in an actual feeling of attempting to properly express my identity, and was instead rooted in a mixture of apprehension, fear, and a sort of sense of surrendering to what I felt was inevitable. I was, in effect, choosing to go for what felt like an easier path to obtain because I wasn't really able to reach a point of safety and security in expressing myself as a woman. And rather than identifying that problem and going through the hard work of attempting to address something that was clearly causing me much consternation with effort and panache, I decided to run away and not do anything about it. And I lived in that low-tier level of suffering and misery and depression, a depression that was not as bad as the suicidal level one that I had felt before I did any transitioning, but which still didn't exactly make me happy or let me feel much euphoria. I was kind of a frog, getting slowly boiled in a pot, at a low enough temperature that I didn't really recognize it as the serious issue that it was. Already, and we haven't really reached the point of the retransition level discussion yet, I think we can see an importance to doing my effort in expressing these kinds of stories, and to putting out there the uncomfortable truths of certain transitions, because so much of trans living is seen in this homogeneous monolithic version of events, when in reality it is so varied, and has so many different kinds of interpretations based on the person involved. I have to assume that I am not alone in experiencing what I have done here, and reacting to it the way that I did. And so, if my tale can serve as some kind of warning for those who find themselves in a similar boat, then that is a very good thing coming out of a very bad time for me. If you recognize some of yourself in this, if you are giving up on transitioning because the search for euphoria and the reduction of dysphoria is just not quite working out and is challenging in the face of, frankly, the overwhelmingly tough cis society, then I can promise you that this just isn't going to be the solution. There are plenty of trans people out there who go from being a binary trans woman, as we sometimes refer to it in the community, sometimes in a derogatory manner and sometimes in a gatekeeping manner, because the whole fucking idea of a unified trans community is a bit of a misnomer. But if you are in either of those camps, then frankly, you can fuck off. Being a binary trans woman doesn't make you a problem reinforcing the cis status quo, and being a binary trans woman also is not the optimal end goal, and all the other kinds of non-binary trans people are just ruining things and making life harder for you. You both need to get over yourselves, lift each other up, and try to make things better through mutual aid and supportiveness rather than that toxicity. As I was saying before I got into one of my rant modes, there are plenty of binary trans women who move into the non-binary space and find happiness and what they are after there. But that was certainly not my experience. And so that naturally brought me, and us, to retransitioning. to the commitment when I realised how sad I really was, to wanting to go down this road again, but with a clearer idea of what I am after and what I need to do and put effort into to maintain it and reach it. I don't want to say that retransitioning is an automatically good thing. I mean, frankly, its very existence indicates that something has gone wrong somewhere down the line in a few ways, but an advantage of it is that you can have learned a lot more about yourself through what you fucked up, and what was fucking you up. For me, I've really realised I don't like being misgendered. I just use she, her, and having that used makes me euphoric, and gives me a sense of being recognised by strangers as who I am. Admitting that, on the internet especially, is a fucking scary thing to do, because it gives all the assholes out there who want to hurt me a clear indicator of how they can do it. But if I'm not brave enough to persevere through difficulties and to push my way through hardships to reach my end goal, then it's going to be very hard to do this retransition. So, have one of my fears. Knock yourself out. That's one of the big things I have learned. Act with confidence in all things. Confidently be a woman and engage with the woman things I want to do, and either wait for the world to catch up or reach a point where eventually I'm aligned with it. And this is the point that brings us to the complicated thing for my end at least. Retransitioning is relatively clear and easy because it's vague and open as to what it is doing, but what I am going to be doing explicitly is very specific. I am recommitting to laser. I've got some brow shaping done. I'm going back on HRT, or I've gone back on HRT. I'm looking into voice lessons for voice training. I'm looking to get haircuts that better align with feminine expression, or what society views that as, and I'm also getting some colour done, although that's just because I like colourful hair. Now, here is the thing. A bunch of those are me doing things for myself because I want to do them, and because I think they'd be fun. I mean, that's true for stuff like makeup, which I never felt confident enough to really get into or to openly wear for fear of being seen with it. But a few of those things are me doing stuff that I'm not necessarily seeking for euphoric reasons, stuff like voice training, which I'm sure you've heard me say many times that I don't really mind my voice. Yet I'm still going to invest time and probably money into it because it is going to solve a pretty huge dysphoria thing for me. The dysphoria of random strangers who don't know me misgendering me because they hear my voice and think, oh, sorry, that's actually a guy because of that. This is what a lot of people call passing. The idea of getting to a point where those in cis society will refer to you as what you want to be without needing a prompt or information from you to do that. And that they will basically see you as cisgender without receiving that information about you being trans from you. This is a complex thing to navigate because it's a very tricky idea, falling into a whole bunch of conversations about trans people attempting to hide our identities, and does that buy into perceptions of being trans as a negative thing, or are trans people engaging with and reiterating stereotypes to attempt to pass better? And while there are some discussions that I think are valid around that, I have always been a person who sees passing as a choice that the trans person involved has just got to make for themselves. Maybe it's coming from a desire for safety, and trust me, I definitely am thinking about that as well. New Zealand isn't as bad as the UK or the USA, but it is certainly far from perfect and is rapidly going downhill. Maybe it comes from a traumatic experience around being linked to transness that the person wants to get away from. For me, it comes from a desire to reduce that misgendering, to reduce a major cause of my dysphoria, and also to give me back a bit of power around my identity. I'm not ashamed to be transgender. My God, look at my channel, which uses my public name and public face and is avidly and persistently trans, I have no issue with it, and with standing up on a stage and shouting it out loud. But I don't want everyone to just know that without me getting a say in them knowing. There is a difference between me wearing a trans pin to inform people and strangers whispering behind my back about my transness. So passing is going to be a big boost for my privacy and my choice around it, as well as for boosting that confidence that I think at this point it should be pretty clear that I struggle with a fair bit. But that's just the definition of what we're talking about. A thing that must happen presumably somewhere and at some points to some people, and my own personal version of it. The question it brings us to now predominantly though, is what does this mean for the wider trans community, and what do I want people to think about from this video? The cis people out there who might have clicked on it and for whom this doesn't necessarily have any personal bearing. Well, what it means is a big thing that I keep thinking we need to really work at changing when it comes to the perception of us as a group, as I mentioned earlier. Namely, the dismantling of the idea of a monolithic version of trans identity. Because a lot of people do have just a single idea of the way that we live, or a unilateral concept of what transition looks like. And when a cis person works off of that notion, it leads to them pigeonholing all trans people into whatever version of us they have been taught by pretty lackluster media, and whatever filters on down through to them via social media or the circles of friends around them. It leads to the spread of misinformation and to confusion when a trans person doesn't align with that, as well as a closing off of opportunities and considerations for alternative pathways in favour of just thinking about it as simplistic. And for a trans person who doesn't have that familiarity with a wider version of trans people and their lives, whether due to the fact that the resources they're using are outdated as hell, the cis medical staff like doctors and endocrinologists and nurses, and even their circles of other trans people and cis people in their lives who might very well be working off the exact same kind of restricted information, pass it on to them, well, that just pushes those people to replicate the same transition narratives, because it doesn't seem like there is another direction. And if you slip off that path, it becomes very easy to feel like a failure, and to feel as if you are doing it wrong. A series of events which can further catalyse wanting to go back in the closet and mess yourself up even further. We need to work really hard when it comes to spreading other stories, and we need to work hard at spreading the stories that just aren't fun or as clear-cut or simple, because otherwise things are not going to improve, and we aren't going to build a more inclusive and functional understanding of what is an incredibly complex and person-dependent identity and expression and life. That's the point of talking about retransition. That's the reason why I want us to be more aware of it. Much in the same way I think we need to be talking about detransition a whole lot more too, and not just having the right wing talking about it, us talking about it. Because those are all parts of the journey, and the more we normalise them and the people who go into and from them, the more comfortable people will feel with exploring their options. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And that's my personal experience of retransitioning and detransitioning too, I suppose. As I said, I don't think I'm alone. There's just no way that I am the only person to deal with this, and yet I don't really know any other stories like it. And when I was looking for help about it, or the comfort of knowing others who dealt with what I did, I just could not find that. So here it is. If you are one of those others in my situation, you're not by yourself in this, and you are not an anomaly or doing transness wrong. You're just taking a different and kind of more difficult approach to reaching the end goal that you've been searching for. And I'm right there with you. Oh, also, I am looking at different stuff with the channel as well. I suppose I'm sort of retransitioning my YouTube too. I'm going to still keep making some of the same content that I have been so far, the trans explorations, but I'm also going to be doing stuff more like this one, a kind of semi-light and free-form discussion of trans elements that I don't see well covered and that I wish people were thinking about more. I've also been eyeing up a few series that I think could be good. One going over the sad and crazy world of Netflix's cancelled one-season show's trash bin. You know, all those series that never managed to make it past one entry into their cultural impact. And a series about how big shows fell apart over time. Because oftentimes those things get forgotten and moved on from so quickly, but there might be some gold in there. Or at the very least, there are some lessons on what people should be doing differently about media. And I also just think it'd be kind of fun. And to people asking for Riverdale Part 2, I'm working on it. It's a lot of content and effort for a follow-up to a video that frankly just didn't do well enough, so the motivation is a little low to the potential payout for it, which does bring us to Patreon. If you want to support this channel and help me do the content that I want to do, as well as supporting me by helping to pay for my rent, power, internet, food, cat, and also retransition now, I guess, because that's another bunch of bills on the pile, well, the best way to do that is by going to my Patreon linked below and subscribing there. Those in the $5 and up category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I am so grateful to all of them for standing by me, and for hopefully enjoying what I do. It is a huge motivating factor in feeling as if I should keep making content when I sometimes get a little bit worried or scared about my place on YouTube, especially recently. There are always new creators with fresh ideas, or more established people with better ideas of what they're doing. And so it can feel a little overwhelming to just be you, struggling to figure out what is going to be good. Imposter syndrome is a bit of a pain in the ass, and a real challenge to conquer, and makes me constantly feel like I just don't belong on YouTube or in the trans community. So yeah, massive thanks to those on that list, and also to everyone who supports this channel in every way that it can be done. You are who I am doing everything on YouTube for. I hope that you liked this video, and that you found it to be an interesting mixture of education and story time, because that's what I was aiming for. Anyways, once more, a big thank you to everyone who watched this far, and I hope that you have a fantastic day filled with doing what you want to do for yourself. Also, the Hogwarts Legacy video, it is coming. The Harry Potter video hit 1 million views, I promised I would do it, so don't worry, I'm working on it. It's just hard, because that game sucks. Also, don't worry, I obtained it through perfectly legal means. So, I didn't give any money to J.K. Rowling is what I'm saying here. So, no worries there.